All right, good morning. This is the Vote Nevada Veterans for Political Innovation webinar with Congresswoman Mary Peltola from Alaska. And we're waiting for the Congresswoman to join our webinar. Things get busy and kind of chaotic in Washington, so it may take her just a minute. But what I would like to do is actually introduce you to former Governor Christine Whitman, who was the former governor of New Jersey. And she was just here in Nevada this last weekend, and I got a chance to meet with her and talk with her. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to her to kind of introduce herself and then maybe speak a little bit about Mary Peltola.
Certainly. Well, thank you, Sandra, and thank you, Eric, for bringing your group along as well. This is a great opportunity to talk about the advantages of being able to break open the duopoly that we suffer from in our political life here in the United States by challenging and giving people an opportunity to vote for the person they really want to vote for, not someone that is restricted by their choice of parties. Mary Peltola is one of the first people to have been elected under this kind of a system. And what it did and what it does when you have ranked choice voting and open primaries is it forces candidates to talk to everybody. It cuts down on the negativity because they want to be at least number 2 on everybody's list. So they don't want to make anybody mad. They don't focus just on their base, which has been the problem up until now, frankly. And she ran her race in a very positive way. She talked about what she wanted to get done for the citizens of Alaska. It was all about them, how she thought government should work, being collegial, working across the aisle, working together. And then she and Lisa Murkowski did something that was really extraordinary. They endorsed each other, a Republican and a Democrat. They crossed the aisles and endorsed one another, one for the Senate and one for the House. So it shows what ranked choice voting and open primaries can do, how it can impact the system in a positive way. And that's really what we want, because what we're saying when you go into a room and you say, how's it working for everybody? Is everybody happy? You won't see many hands go up. Do you think government is responding to you? Again, you're not going to get many hands raised. So what we want and what Forward Party, of which I co-chair, wants to do is to support those candidates who they can have a label of Republican, Democrat, Independent. We'll still support them if they agree with our basic principles. And they're pretty straightforward. It's respect for the rule of law, support of the Constitution, economic opportunity for all, respect for one another, a willingness to work across the aisle if you want to get the forward support. And also, we ask those who want our backing to agree to work to change the way we elect our representatives. For us, it's ranked choice voting and open primaries. There are other ways to do it, which we would support if we thought they were legitimate. But the important thing is we've got to open the process. And many states, if you're a registered independent, it's almost impossible to vote in the primary, if it's possible at all. I know in my home state of New Jersey, it's very difficult. So this is something that will allow everyone to have an opportunity to be heard and to get candidates at the end of the day who have 50% of the vote, support of 50% of the electorate. And when you think about how many minority presidents we've had, much less Congress people and people in the local offices. In fact, there are 500,000 elective offices across the United States. 70% of them are traditionally uncontested. That means just one choice. And we in Forward Party want to make sure that that changes. We think everyone should have a choice at every level. So we're focused on the ground up. We're focused on the local, as well as moving up the congressional and the senatorial. And that's why we're so happy if the Congresswoman gets to be breaking her system to welcome her and to hear from her how it worked for her.
All right. There she is. Yay. So Eric, can you explain kind of why veterans are involved in this real quick? We'll give the Congresswoman a chance to take a breath. I know you're probably running around, but go ahead, Eric.
Yes, and welcome, Congresswoman Peltola. It's so good to be here with you. I'm the founder of Veterans for Political Innovation, and my co-founder, Todd Connor, is also on the Zoom. Our board chair, Yinka Falati, along with volunteer state leaders, veterans from across the country and across the political spectrum, are joining us for this call because we are very excited to be champions for Final Five voting, or Final Four voting in your case. And we're excited, Congresswoman, for many reasons, but you are the first person elected to Congress under this new system. And we feel like, and I want to thank you for embodying the bipartisan spirit that we hope Final Four voting will reward in cities and states across the country. So we're excited to mobilize veterans as trusted messengers for this very specific reform package that we think will make politics less toxic and our government more functional. And your story gives us a lot of hope. So we're grateful to be here.
So good morning, Congresswoman. I'm fangirling a little bit because I have been following your campaign. So it's so nice to meet you. So I'm Sandra Cosgrove. I'm a history professor here at the community college. I do a lot with civics education. And I've been working on ballot question 3 here, which is the open primary with ranked choice voting here, similar to what happened, you guys passed in Alaska. So when the special election came up this summer, I was very interested to kind of watch to see how things were going to play out in Alaska. Because up until that point, everything we were talking about was kind of theoretical. And so I was watching that whole list of people that was on the open primary. I think it was like 48. And I'm like, okay, lots of people are very interested. But then when your name came through as one of the people that made it through for the general election, I'm like, oh, I don't know Mary Peltola. I should research her. I Googled your name and saw you were indigenous and went, oh my gosh, someone who understands consensus democracy, this is going to be awesome. And so I thought she's naturally going to understand ranked choice voting. And then I've now been following your interviews in the Native press and like Christian Science Monitor, where you talk about your culture. So could you start out really maybe talking about how your traditional indigenous culture, when you're used to doing like tribal politics and that, blended with kind of the ranked choice voting campaign style?
Sure. Thank you, Sandra. Good morning. My name is Mary Peltola. I'm from the community of Bethel. Its real name is Mamdreesremut. It means the place of many fish caches. And I spent 10 years in the Alaska State Legislature. I was in a mini minority all 10 years, but still found a way to be effective through reinvigorating what was called the Bush Caucus. And it was 10 of us from off-road districts. Usually it was 5 Republicans, 5 Democrats. So it's muscle memory to work in a bipartisan way for me. It's the only way to get things done. And then the last 5 years, I have been working for the Kuskokwim River Intertribal Fish Commission on salmon management. And in my opinion, there's really nothing more contentious than salmon and fighting over fish in your own river in places like Alaska. So, and really one of the best things that I ever, one of the best experiences I could ever have had is working with 33 tribal commissioners, most of whom were elders, and really seeing people leading by example through these traditional values of, we have what we call rules. And one of them is you don't speak in ways that are upsetting or offensive to anyone. You really try to speak in ways that are calming. We're not supposed to use a harsh voice or harsh tones. Like it's not even about the words you use, it's about the tone and tenor of what you're saying. And then very simple things. And I think these are kind of universal values of you don't speak to something unless you've seen it or experienced it firsthand. You've heard it with your own ears or seen it with your own eyes. So just simple things like that. And one of the things I learned when I was working at our state capitol in Juneau is you really have to have, it's a 60-member bicameral legislature, and you really needed to have 59 best friends to accomplish anything. If people don't like you, you're not going to be effective. They're not going to want to see you succeed or your bills or your issues that you're championing. So, and I voted yes for ranked choice voting, having no thought of getting back into electoral politics at the time. I was very happy living the life I led, and no imaginings of ever running for a federal seat. And when Congressman Young passed away, I did think about it, and there were, and it was this new system, and that was very helpful. And one of the things that I did to start off with was to see if I had enough support from establishment. And so since I had been a Democrat for 25 years, that's naturally where I went. And all of the establishment had already aligned themselves with two different kind of progressive men. And I think that's another thing that is very common, is it's usually a man's time, or he's paid his dues. So it is that person's time to be ascended through the party ranks. And luckily, because of ranked choice voting, I was able to work around that.
Awesome. And I guess the word that I kept seeing in every article I read about you is the word nice. She's just a
And
nice
that's not
person.
even true. It's not even true. But I guess if you're civil and respectful, people interpret that as being nice.
And she's the only person I follow on Twitter that hashtag fish. I love that about you too.
Yeah.
Eric, and she kind of touched on the question you wanted to ask.
Yes, Congresswoman. So we, Veterans for Political Innovation, is nonpartisan, nonprofit. I happen to live in Missouri, a red state, where many red states ranked choice voting is, people are skeptical, right? They see it as a potential Trojan horse to get Democrats elected. So when they saw the outcome in Alaska, some of my conservative friends here in Missouri grew more concerned. And I was wondering if you could speak to that. We believe that this system, Final Four voting, favors common sense problem solvers equally. But what would you say to conservative friends who are maybe skeptical of the system itself?
Well, one of the things that helps me balance it out a little bit is knowing that the Democrats in Alaska were vehemently opposed to this new method as well. And when I found out that real partisan Democrats were as recalcitrant and reticent to try something new as the Republicans, that's encouraging to me. If both sides have equal disdain, maybe that says something. And I think that for both parties, there is a lot to lose, because like I said, these really, like the party elite have so much more power within their party than they would if they have to operate outside their party.
So can you elaborate on that? So you were considered, like, you ran as a Democrat, so you didn't have to change to be an independent or change your party affiliation, but yet you were kind of the outsider. You weren't the endorsed candidate. How did you manage that with like funders and staff and being able to put like your machine together?
Well, I just plowed ahead. I just said, okay, I don't have the support of the Democrats either nationally or statewide. I don't have, I don't have a bunch of money. I don't have PACs. I don't have native corporations. So I just did best practices. I just focused on my call time. Call time is winning time. And in a state like Alaska, where there are very few people, talking to one person and connecting with one person and getting one person on side means that that's potentially 20 people, because every person in Alaska is so connected. And every event that I had later down the road, there would be someone I spent 15 or 30 minutes on the phone with, every time I go to the airport now, I see someone I spent time with on the phone. So really just doing what, minding my own knitting, just forging ahead, getting my own logo, my own yard signs, my own kind of talking points, being pro-fish. That's not very partisan. And, to be honest, being a Democrat in Alaska is a terrible albatross. That the Democratic Party and that label is a real burden.
Did you think about becoming an independent?
I did, but it seems so disingenuous after being a registered Democrat for 25 years. It seems like a political ploy to change your party affiliation right before you run for a federal seat.
At least you said it out loud. Oftentimes candidates won't say that. So Eric, did you want to go with another question?
I did. Thanks, Sandra. And actually, Congresswoman, I'm a lifelong independent, and close to 50% of veterans have never identified with either party, which is one of the reasons why we started Veterans for Political Innovation. I'm curious, two of your fellow members in Congress are supporters of Final Four or Final Five voting. They both happen to be veterans. Congresswoman Chrissy Houlihan from Pennsylvania, Congressman Mike Gallagher from my home state of Wisconsin, Republican. And I'm curious, how would you counsel us to build momentum around these reforms, around Final Four, Final Five voting in cities and states around the country?
Well, like I said earlier, I think it really leaves the cult partisanship at the door. I mean, it is, I think, the only way we can combat that. And it also precludes people from speaking to 20% of the electorate. Usually your partisan base is 20% of the population, and it just seems dangerous almost. I mean, we saw where partisanship gets us. It gets us insurrections. And watching that insurrection on January 6th really kind of woke me up, and I had completely dropped out. I didn't even like listening to NPR because there was just so much negativity, and it was honestly soul crushing listening to that day after day, story after story. And I thought, I physically just cannot do this. So I really built up my music playlist and, found other things to listen to, because I just, you just don't need it. There's enough going on in our own lives or at the municipal level or, locally. So, but watching what happened on January 6th made me reassess that feeling. But I just think, and I think that it is really worth mentioning and highlighting that both parties dislike it equally.
Mm.
And I think most of us are middle people, middle and not terribly partisan.
It's interesting what you just said about kind of tuning out. Again, I'm at the community college, so I've got like freshman, sophomore. And my Gen Z students desperately want to break out of the stereotype that they're apathetic or they don't care about politics. So when the election cycle got going, I mean, they were ready. But literally by the middle of October, they're like, Professor Cosgrove, it's hurting my mental health. It is so negative. I don't, and they're like, it follows me. There it is on Spotify. There it is on YouTube. And they're like, I don't want to tune out and quit, but I just can't take it anymore.
It's a thing.
Right? Governor Whitman.
Yes, thank you, Congresswoman, for being on this. It's really wonderful to have your experience, real life experience, explaining how the system works. So my question to you is, both parties hate it for good reason, which is wonderful. And I think the more we highlight that, the more people will come to understand what it can do in enabling them to get people that they really respect in office. But I know in Alaska now there's a movement, certainly among Republicans, I presume the Democrats as well, to try to change the system, to get it back to where it was. How likely do you think the voters of Alaska are going to accept that?
I'm very curious to see. I was surprised to see that it encouraged, and pleasantly surprised to see that ranked choice voting had enough of a majority. I am worried about it. And it's funny because the people, as an example, my friend Sarah Palin in the June 11th election got a third. She got 30% of the Alaskan voters in that special election primary. And there were no complaints then. Nobody was grousing about it then. And the same is true with, I think, Kelly Chewbacca. People weren't terribly upset when things were looking more favorable. But, and in one of the questions, there was a question about people saying it's too complicated. I don't think it's too complicated. I think it's really simple. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. We often list things in the, prioritize things, put favorites. And for those of us who grew up with multiple choice questions where you fill in the little oval, there couldn't be anything more simple. It's extremely simple. Maybe it's the name ranked choice. I don't know if that, and I know the word rank has multiple meanings in English. Maybe instant runoff would be simpler. I think
Yes.
there's a lot to names, and not using letters and acronyms I think is really good. But I think we should be really careful what we call things.
Right. We found the instant runoff. When you say ranked choice voting, people are like, what? But as soon as you say, no, it's instant runoff, they're like, oh, okay, I get that. I understand
Yeah.
that. You know, it's interesting because I was also watching what happened in the Senate in Alaska, that bipartisan coalition. And I did read somewhere that the leading Republican in your Senate now would be opposed to getting rid of the new system. Have you heard anything about that?
And who is that? Is that in the state or
The state in Alaska?
I don't know. What was the question again?
So in the state Senate, so thinking about state politics, I know you're living in doing the Washington, D.C. stuff, that in your state Senate that you had, even though the Republicans have the majority, they formed a coalition with the Democrats, and that enough of the people who are in your state Senate now benefited from the new system that they would be opposed to it going away.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like, since we've all gone through it and seen the benefits of it, and that it isn't terribly complicated. And, one of the grievances is that it takes a long time after election day to wait for the mail to come in and tabulate. That's always been an issue in Alaska. We have real hinterlands in Alaska. There are very out of the way places that are hard to get into. Mail planes, there, villages that I grew up in, there would be sometimes 2 weeks when the mail plane couldn't make it. And then we have a lot of folks who are in military service, and we need to make sure that their ballots get back. So that is an age-old issue in Alaska, and it will never change.
Yeah, I noticed in the primary for the special election, Santa Claus from the North Pole was actually on the list.
That's a true thing. He legally changed his name, and he was actually one of the more formidable people out of the 48 candidates. He really had chops. He's been on his municipal government for years, and even though his legal name is Santa Claus, and he's on the city council for North Pole, Alaska, he was a real contender and a real public policy person.
See, this is why when people are like, is Nevada and Alaska alike? Are they the same? I'm like, yeah, we're goofy down here too, where we have people who, end up on the ballot and you're like, oh, God is apparently running.
Yeah.
Right. I read that you went ahead and you're keeping some of Congressman Young's staff. And it was interesting that when people were like, why would you do that? And your answer was, because it makes sense.
There isn't one Alaskan person who isn't happy with that choice. Most people who are in the office who come to visit me have been coming to see Don Young for years and years, Congressman Young. So they were so relieved that Alex Ortiz, his former chief of staff of 10 years, is in the office. Alex knows Alaska, the regions, the issues, the people, and they know him. And so it seemed foolish to let a resource go like that go. I mean, he has a lot of institutional knowledge, both in Washington, D.C. and in Alaska. So he's a tremendous asset to our team.
Yeah, and I thought that was just refreshing because you were like, because it makes sense, because he knows everything. Why wouldn't I keep him?
Yeah.
I know you can see the Q&A. Is there anything on there? And some of the questions, I think I'll be able to help people who want to maybe do ranked choice in their state and kind of know what we're doing. But is there any questions that you see that jump out that you would like to answer? I mean, we had 150 people. We knew you were coming Friday. 150 people have already RSVP'd for this.
No, I really appreciate it. And I just have one disclaimer. There's a lot of people who thought that Senator Murkowski and I formally endorsed each other. That actually wasn't the case. We're friends. We were both freshmen in the state legislature the same year. I've always really appreciated her friendship and her advice. She was a professional mother before I was, and gave me a lot of good life hacks on being a professional mom. But a reporter actually asked her at the Alaska Federation of Natives Convention who she's voting for out of the field of candidates for the House seat. And after 19 seconds, she finally responded Mary Peltola, I'm going to get in so much trouble for saying this. And then they asked me who I'm voting for. And I said, of course, Lisa. So it wasn't really a formal endorsement. We just said out loud who we intended to vote for. We really are friends. And I think it's worth noting that Lisa and I are aligned on almost every single issue, and we're both from different parties.
Well, and then one of the things I really appreciate that I saw you doing was, and I know she already has independent relationships with the indigenous population in Alaska, but oftentimes you both going together. And I know sometimes for white candidates, they're not sure what to do and say when they go to a reservation or a village. And it's helpful when they have an ally that can say, no, she's okay. She understands us, talk to her, it'll be okay. Because people get nervous about having an outsider coming into your space.
Yeah, Lisa, she actually lost her closed party Republican primary in 2010. And it was actually Alaska Natives who basically drafted her and said, if you will run as a write-in, we will do everything in our power to help you get elected. And we did. I was one of those people. So, in Alaska Natives, we want the same things that everybody wants. Good schools, safe, healthy homes for our
Good
kids.
internet.
Good internet access, reliable internet access. I wouldn't be doing the Zoom from even the hub of my home region right now. Internet is so spotty. Good drinking water, good environment, good jobs. We all want the same things.
Awesome. Eric, do you have anything else for the Congresswoman? And then I know you're super busy. We can let you go.
Not in particular. I was looking through the questions in the chat. There's a lot of great questions there. Maybe one which I've sort of already asked Congresswoman, but there's some questions about in states such as Texas, they're trying to get a bill passed to use instant runoff for military and overseas ballots. And you might know that 6 southern states already use ranked choice, AKA instant runoff for military and overseas voting. Saves tons of money, saves time, right? But what would be, in your opinion, the most compelling arguments we could make to Republican state legislators on why they should use instant runoff voting in any capacity?
Because the Democrats hate it as much as they do. I really can't think of a better argument. I really can't. It is really unfortunate, the rancor, and I didn't enjoy doing Zooms, like fundraising Zooms with any other candidates, because just listening to and I don't think there were many exceptions, listening to their talking points, more than half of their talking points are disparaging other people in the race. And nobody wants to hear that.
Right. And so just to kind of, for those of you who are not sure how ranked choice voting helps do what the Congresswoman just said, is when you know that the voters are going to be ranking, you want to make sure you're talking to voters who are going to rank you as their second choice. Because if you've got 4, we would have 5 people in the race. It's not likely somebody's going to get that 50% and go over the winning mark on the first round. And so the person with the least number of votes will drop off, and then their voter's second choice becomes really important. So if Eric and I were running in a ranked choice race, and Eric and I agreed on a lot of things, I wouldn't want to be disparaging Eric, because then his voters wouldn't rank me second. And it would be the same with my voters. It would make more sense for us to go out together and say to their voter, could I be your second choice? Here's where we agree. One of the things I also see is I can't wait to be able to sit down with voters and say, let's do a strategy and decide who your second choice is, and tell those people, hey, come over and pander to me. I got a second choice vote. Come talk to me.
Sandra, when I was in Fairbanks, I signed up to be in a parade pretty late. And so I was the second to last float. So by the time I was walking through town, and Fairbanks is a very conservative town. It's a gold rush town. I would see people with Palin or Begich signs as I was walking, and every single person I said, hey, great candidate, I'd love to be your second choice. And every time they burst out laughing, because they were really like ready to for us to mean mug each other as I walked by. And they were so shocked that I would say, really good person that you're going to vote for first, please consider me as your second choice.
And that's, I mean, and just that right there, I want that. I want that system. I know you're super busy today, but we would like to invite you to come back maybe again in March, because where I teach, we do Women's History Month and Native American Heritage Month the same. We do it in March, not November. So we really try to uplift women. And so I know a lot of our Indigenous students would love to ask you questions about running for office. And
I would love
then
that.
maybe in the summer when you're heading back on break to go to Alaska, I know your Deputy Chief of Staff, Anton, has family here. And he used to go to the CSM where I work, small world. That possibly we could get you and maybe Lisa Murkowski and Governor Whitman together. So 3 strong women can talk about why the system's important.
I would love that. It's such an honor to be on a panel with you, Governor Whitman. And the other thing I'll say, somebody put in the chat, and this is a fact, a very conservative right-wing governor was also elected. And he actually, I think, got over 50%. He was the one of us on the ballot who was clearly the winner. So it, and the only thing, you know, people have tried to puzzle that one out. How was a very right-wing conservative governor and a centrist Lisa and a Democrat Mary, how were they all elected? And I think maybe it has to do with our actions on the Typhoon Merbok. I don't know. I mean, sometimes emergency response.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, the governor gets it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, it's my pleasure to meet you, because I love your state, having been there numerous times and been out to some of the local communities that are out on the more distant areas, shall we say, not just honing to Fairbanks or any place like that, but also I have fished the Kenai. The other thing I can say is I didn't catch anything. My chief of staff caught a salmon, but I didn't. I fired her right away, of course, because that was just, but, you know, but I love your state.
Oh,
Truly appreciate the message that you're bringing and the way you're yourself in Congress. It's not easy. I can imagine. I wouldn't want to be down there, but try to give young Tom Kane some of that too, so that he, because he's naturally inclined to be that kind of a person.
Well, it's such a privilege to be here. Thank you so much for letting me share it with you.
Thank you. And we're going to
you.
make sure and make sure all the questions that have been asked that I can either talk to you, Chief of Staff, or somebody here can answer them so that they all get answered.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Congresswoman.
Thank you, everybody who joined.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Governor.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, so I'll make sure on the questions, she could kind of see them, but she basically carved out 30 minutes of her lunchtime. So she only had a little bit of time, but I'm hoping we'll have her back in March. Because we celebrate Indigenous Heritage Month in March instead of November, because it's obnoxious to do that in November where Thanksgiving is. So we blended in with Women's Empowerment Month. I'm hoping we can get a longer Zoom with her in March to talk more about her campaign and, you know, the strategies that they used. And like even that story in the parade where she was like shocking people when she said, "Hey, can I be your second?" And people were laughing. I'd love to hear more stories about that. And then the Gwynn Center, I think they would be willing to host another event and have Governor Whitman, maybe Senator Murkowski and Congresswoman Peltola, have them come into Vegas, and then we can live stream it where they can really talk more about election reform, where our democracy is, those types of things. So Governor Whitman, do you have anything else you'd like to say?
No, except I think, you know, she's extremely impressive, and she personifies why getting a new system is so important and how it can be so beneficial to people. I mean, it's
Exactly.
just, can you imagine if we had a whole Congress like that would actually work together and talk about the issues that are important to their constituents, but take on the national issues, but do it in a collegial way.
And be able to answer the question, why did you do that? Because it made sense.
Right.
Right.
I did the same sort of thing. I didn't fire all the Democrats. And when I got into the administration and I was asked, I was told I had to do it. I mean, that's just what you do. And I said, no, if they're doing a good job, why would I take them out of that?
Exactly.
So it does make
Eric, how about you? Closing comments?
Yeah, no, just very inspiring. I mean, this is why we're so excited about Final Four, Final Five voting, right? rewards a completely different type of behavior, which
Yep.
we've seen in the Congresswoman. And, you know, for anyone who wants to get smarter on what Final Four or Final Five is, this is a great place to start. This book is foundational to, you know, the work that we're doing at Veterans for Political Innovation. But we're just excited about. Oh, thanks, Governor.
Thanks,
Very
Governor.
excited to be
We'll
working
be in
with you.
touch.
Yep.
Okay, so very last
think-
thing.
I think you're still recording, Sandra. Is that?
Yes, I still want to record. So
Oh,
very
okay.
last thing before I stop the recording, very last thing is if you're interested here in Nevada, what we're talking about was ballot question number 3 on the ballot in 2022. It's going to be on the ballot again in 2024. And basically what it does is it allows for open primaries at the top of the ticket. So right now we have open primary for our judicial races. This would do open primary for our congressional races and our legislative races. So the ones in the middle. So we would have executive branch, legislative branch added to the judicial branch, and it would be members of Congress. So it'd be top of the ticket, open primary. Everybody's on one ballot. Everybody gets to vote. Top 5 would move forward. In Alaska, they did top 4. But if it wasn't for top 4, Mary Peltola would not have made it through because she was number 4. So we would do top 5 just to get more people, more variety, more choices moving forward. And then you would do instant runoff in the general election, and you would just rank your candidates in preference. 1 vote would be sufficient, but you could go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then if the first tabulation, if somebody doesn't get to 50%, the candidate with the least number of votes drops off. And then they look at that person's voters and they calculate those voters' second choice. So the second choice votes goes up to their second choice candidates. They tabulate again, and they just do that until we get to somebody with 50%. Because we want to make sure it's a consensus candidate, somebody that everybody can agree, okay, this person's okay, we can work with them. And so that's what Alaska just did in their elections. That's what we're proposing in Nevada through that ballot question. And that's what Eric and the Veterans for Political Innovation, those are the conversations they're having in the states where they're active.
Yes.
If you need any more information, you can contact Vote Nevada. Go ahead, Eric.
Yes, Vote Nevada or veteransforpoliticalinnovation.org has a lot of great explainer resources. And we're working to bring Final Five voting to New York City right now. Bipartisan legislation in Wisconsin, and 3 or 4 other states will likely move forward with ballot initiatives for Final Four or Final Five voting in 2024. So we're excited to bring instant runoff voting to more places as quickly as possible, and the open primaries. And the idea is more choices, more competition in every single race in November will get we the people better results.
Absolutely. All right, Eric, thank you for joining me today. This has been awesome.
Thank you, Sandra.
And thank you, everybody. And I will be sending out, as soon as I process this recording, I'll send it out through the RSVP list.
Great. Thanks,
All right.
everyone, for joining us.
Have a good day.